88 years is a very long time, longer than I think pretty much most of us have been alive. The reason why we decided to host this event today was that it's 88 years to the day that something very, very bad happened. Something dark in our history, the darkest day in the history of Islam. From the time of the Prophet ﷺ in Madinah, up until 88 years ago today, Islam as an authority was established upon the earth. And the will of Allah, the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was implemented upon mankind. And 88 years ago, on March the 3rd, 1924, it was destroyed, it was taken away. And ever since that day, Islam has only existed in the masjids, in our hearts, and pretty much during Ramadan. And what we knew, what came before, is now lost. Islam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decided, had declared what it was meant to be for us, was lost. And that's why today we hosted this event. That's why it's called the Rise, Fall and Return of Islam. Because some would say we still have Islam. Now, the format for tonight is that we're going to do it in that order. We're going to go chronologically. First of all, Brother Mazhar to my left, he's going to talk about what we call the golden age of Islam. What happened when this was actually implemented, when Islam in its full form was actually present on the earth. We've all heard the stories about how the Muslims were previously, but that's what we're going to cover in the first talk, inshallah. The second one is going to be something which we're all familiar with, the present, the time, the thing when we switch on the news of the situation we see ourselves in, the reasons why this has happened, what's actually happening out there and what we can do about it. And then the third talk, inshallah, if any of you have seen the flyer, is going to be the promise of Allah, that which is going to come in the future, and that which we need to walk towards, inshallah. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Mazhar on my left, and inshallah he's going to talk about the past, the golden age of Islam, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. As Abdul Rahim mentioned, the first talk is about the period of time where the rule of Islam was present. The rule of Islam, as you know, didn't begin with the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. The rule of Islam didn't begin with the commencement of the revelation of the Quran. The rule of Islam didn't begin when the Prophet ﷺ began his da'wah in Mecca. The rule of Islam began when the Muslims migrated from Mecca to Madinah, and the rules of Islam were applied on that society. And it's no coincidence. It's no coincidence that the calendar that we follow in Islam, called the Hijri calendar, began at that time, and not with those issues that I just mentioned. The calendar of Islam begins when the Islamic State began, and that's no coincidence. So the Islamic State began in Medina. And what does it mean to have an Islamic State? In one hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, the knots of Islam will be untied. Each time a knot is undone, people will grab onto the next knot. And the first knot to be untied will be the knot of ruling. It means, and the hadith continues to say, the last knot to be untied will be the knot of Salah, namaz. What this hadith means is, as long as the knot of ruling is kept, your whole of Islam will be protected. Once you break the knot of ruling, meaning once the Islamic government disappears, your Islam will start to unravel until the last thing that is left is just your Salah. So what did it mean to have an Islamic State? You know, to talk of over 1,000 years of history in the next 15-20 minutes is not going to be really possible. So I'm just going to draw on a number of examples to try and illustrate in your minds what it was like to have an Islamic State on earth. The first point, and the most visible point of having the Islamic State, we see is that Islam expanded. The rule of Islam expanded. Now if I ask you the question, How many Muslims were there in Mecca? Not many. They were persecuted? Not many. How many Muslims migrated from Mecca to Medina? Not many. You could count them. But then, how many Muslims were there 10 years after Hijrah in Medina? When the Prophet ﷺ finished his office on this earth and Allah took him away, how many Muslims existed then? And you could say hundreds of thousands of Muslims. The whole of Arabia was ruled by Islam. How many Muslims were there at the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu? We would say millions. Whole of Arabia was part of Islam. The Persian Empire, all of that was under Islam. Parts of Africa was under Islam. When we look at the time of Uthman bin Affan, many of the Mediterranean islands, including Cyprus, were part of the Islamic State. In less than 100 years after Rasulullah established Islam in Madinah, which was a village, it was a village smaller than many of the villages we go back to Pakistan and India. 100 years after bringing Islam to Medina, Islam was in Spain. Islam was in Spain in less than 100 years. So what's the difference? No Islamic State, very few people embrace Islam. Islamic State, hundreds and millions of people embrace Islam. You know the story, there's a story that we hear in the masjid quite often, and you would have all heard it, about when Ali radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa, and a Jewish person stole his shield. You know the story, yeah? And then they went to court, and the judge ruled in the favor of the Jew because Ali radiallahu anhu didn't have any evidence. And what do people say? MashaAllah, Islam is so nice, Islam is so just. What people don't think about is this Jewish man lived in the society of the Sahaba. He never embraced Islam. The Jewish man knew Ali radiallahu anhu was the most pious man in his society. He never embraced Islam. He lived amongst pious Muslims. He never embraced Islam. But when he was affected by Islam, when he was affected by the laws of Islam, he realized that Islam is just. When he went to court and he found that the Muslims do not discriminate if you're a non-Muslim. The Islamic Sharia does not discriminate against you if you're not a Muslim. Then he went to Ali and he says, indeed I stole your shield, and here it is. And he declared his faith, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And he became a Muslim. And Ali radiallahu anhu gave the shield back as a gift. The point here is, because the Islamic State existed, Islam was delivered to the non-Muslims in a practical way. They could see what is Islam. They could see the justice of Islam. They could see that Islam protected humanity. And that is why, from 100 years after Islam coming to Medina, Islam was in Spain. No aeroplanes, no computers, no technology, no nothing. Just a pen, a sword and a camel. And Islam went all the way to Spain. So that is one example of what it means to have an Islamic State. Islamic State is the practical way to convey the da'wah of Islam to the whole of mankind. The Islamic State is a practical way to deliver Islam to society. Let's look at another point. Looking after people. What effect did the Islamic State have? In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, beware, every one of you is a shepherd, and everyone is answerable with regard to his flock. The Khalif is a shepherd over the people and shall be questioned about his subjects. And the hadith continues. What does this hadith mean? In Islam, Islam is not a philosophy. Islam is not a theory. Islam is something which is real. It came to affect society. So how did this hadith manifest itself? It manifested itself by the Khalifas being concerned about the people. We know the stories that when Umar al-Faruq radiallahu anhu was a Khalif, any woman had a baby, he would give her money to look after the baby, what today we would call child benefit. Every citizen of the Islamic State, whether unemployed or employed, got a payment from Baytul Mal just for being a citizen of the Islamic State. Because the Khalifa didn't want anybody to go hungry. We know about these stories, but people say, yeah, that was the golden era, when you had the Khilafah Rashida. But let's talk about the Khilafah that came after that. They cared for the people too. Some were good, some were not very good, but they still cared for the people. You know, if you look into history, in the 10th century, there's a city in Spain called Cordoba. And this is what it says in the history books. By the 10th century, Cordoba distinguished itself as the most advanced city in Europe. Remember, it's ruled by Muslims in Spain. Dwellers enjoyed running water, private homes had paved streets, private homes had running water, they had paved streets, they had street lighting, and they had lush gardens. This was several hundred years before there was a paved street in Paris or there were street lights in London. So hundreds of years before London had street lighting and hundreds of years before France had paved footpaths, the Islamic city of Cordoba in Spain had lights and streets, paved streets. They say in Cordoba there were 200,000 homes, 800 public schools, and a number of colleges and universities. This is because Islam cared for the people, and the Khilafah cared for the people, and hence they provided for their needs. Another great city of that time, Baghdad. Baghdad became the capital of the Islamic State during the Abbasi Khilafah. It became a capital of the Islamic State. And because of that, thousands and thousands of people moved to Baghdad, and the city became too big. So it created a lot of problems. Simple things like going to the toilet. You know, if you're in a village, if you want to go to the toilet, you nip out to the field. You do your business and you come back. If you're living in a society where you've got 1 million people living there, you can't just nip out. You need facilities. And so this caused a lot of new issues. And this is what he says in the books. They said Muslim engineers built a canal from the Euphrates to the Tigris. Now when you've got millions of people living, you need water. There's not enough water in a dry desert country like Iraq. So they built a canal. The swamps around Baghdad were drained, freeing the city of malaria. Muslim engineers constructed elaborate underground water canals. This led to the development of domestic water systems with sewers, public baths, drinking fountains, piped drinking water supplies, and widespread private and public toilets and bathing facilities. We're talking about the 10th century. You know, in the 1950s in England, many houses didn't have a bathroom. Many houses in Britain didn't have a bathroom in the 1950s. We're talking about the 10th century in Baghdad, where the Khalifa made a drainage system and a water system whereby people could have these facilities local to where they live. Muslims invented things. Muslim engineer perfected the water turbine, which gave rise to paper mills, sugar mills, steel mills, and made earth-shattering breakthrough in the 12th century. Al-Jazari, through his work, managed to invent a crankshaft. He managed to invent a crankshaft to make rotary motion from a linear motion. And you think, big deal, but it was. Because in that time, nobody had invented that. And because of this, they were able to have mills and factories. And because of this is what the Western people used to have the Industrial Revolution. And this is the basic technology of changing linear motion to rotary motion, which led to the invention of cars and steam engines. Muslims invented this hundreds of years ago. Hundreds of years ago. And there's many, many examples like this I could go through. Let's look at another aspect of what it meant to have an Islamic system. In one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, the Muslim Ummah is a unique Ummah amongst the whole of mankind. Their land is one, their war is one, their peace is one, their honor is one, their trust is one. So the job of the Khalifa is to protect the people. Right? Now when we come to talks, we hear stories about how Muslims were protected. We know the story of Amuriya, when a woman was humiliated and the Khalifa heard about it. He sent an army to the strongest Roman city to defeat them, to teach them a lesson that you do not touch Muslim women. We know the story of Muhammad bin Qasim, when a woman was violated, her dignity was violated in the area of Pakistan, as we call it today. He sent an army to defeat the Hindus and bring Islam to that land. Today, we have our rulers giving our daughters to the Americans to torture and imprison in Afia Siddiqui. In those days, if anybody harmed a Muslim, The kuffar knew you don't touch a Muslim and get away with it. But not only that, the Islamic State protected your Islam. There was a man in Liverpool. He became a Muslim. His name was Abdullah Quilliam. And he had a friend whose brother was a playwright. And he went on holiday to Isle of Man. Right, we're talking about 1890. 1890. We're not talking about Khilafah Rashida. We're talking about 1890. And he went to the Isle of Man for a holiday. And he was sitting in his friend's house, and his brother was a playwright, and he goes, look, my brother wrote this play, and he read the play. The play was about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abdullah Quilliam didn't like that play. He found it insulting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wrote a letter to India, and he wrote a letter to the Khalif. Sultan Abdul Hamid wrote a letter to Queen Victoria. He said, don't put this play on. And Victoria's government replied and said, we will put this play on because we believe in freedom. Sultan Abdul Hamid wrote the second letter. He goes, if you insult my Prophet, it is incumbent upon me to declare Jihad Akbar on you. And remember, the Islamic State is very small now, very weak. It's in its end days. And the British Empire rules a third of the world, if not half of the world. But when the Sultan said, we will come and fight you, Britain cancelled the play. Now when they write comics against Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nobody's able to do anything. When Salman Rushdie wrote a book, nobody was able to do anything. When they write a book to insult Aisha radiallahu anha with the jewel of Madinah, nobody's able to do anything. But one letter from the Khalif of the Muslim was enough to protect the dignity of Islam's personalities. Let's look at another thing, learning. The Quran, what's the first verse when the Quran was revealed? Iqra. Iqra. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, words of wisdom is the lost property of a believer. So wherever you find them, take it. So seeking knowledge is an obligation on Muslims. What did this lead to? This led to the Muslims establishing a university in Cairo in 975, over 1,000 years ago. And it was the largest university of its time. They established a university in Baghdad in 1091. And at the time it was the largest university in the world, established by Khalif Muntasir. And there were many universities like that. And what did this lead to? This led to the Muslims leading in all fields of knowledge: science, alchemy, physics, astronomy, and all these other fields of learning. The Muslims were the leaders. There was one Islamic chemist, his name was Jabir ibn Hayyan, and he used to write books about chemistry. And they were all in Arabic. And people around the world would read his books. And in Britain, the only people that could read and write in Britain were the priests. So they used to import his books, and they used to read it. But it was so advanced, they couldn't understand his books. So when they would say, what does he say? He goes, I can't understand it. He goes, why? He goes, it's written by Jabbar. And the word gibberish comes from this. Gibberish is a term of respect, actually, because the Christian priests couldn't understand the books written by Jabir ibn Hayyan. They couldn't understand his books, they were so advanced, and hence this term was coined called gibberish. One of the Khalifs in Baghdad, he created a house, and they called it Baytul Hikmah, the house of wisdom. And he said to his learned scholars and people that if you find a book that I haven't got, I want you to bring it and translate it. So people went around the world to find books. They went to China, they went to Persia, they went to Rome, they went to Greece, they went to India, and they brought back books and they translated them. And it was the largest place, the largest library in the world of knowledge. And the books were translated, and the Muslims learned the knowledge in these books. And then they built on this knowledge, and then they wrote new books, and they sent them out to the world. So the Muslims educated the world with knowledge which had become dead. the Muslims had educated the world with knowledge which had become dead. And this place, Baytul Hikmah, was the largest library in the world. You know, and remember, we're talking about the 8th century. This is the 8th century. This was Google before Google was invented. This was WikiLeaks before WikiLeaks came into existence. So you can go on Google and find any knowledge. You had that in Baytul Hikmah. You want to find something now, you go on WikiLeaks. We had that in Baytul Hikmah. We done it, we did it, we got the t-shirt. That was in the 8th century. That was in the 8th century. Let's look at something else. What did it mean to have an Islamic state? Tolerance. Rasulullah said, he who harms a dhimmi has harmed me. Meaning that treat the non-Muslims in the Islamic state well. Do not abuse them. And we know the stories about the Muslims in Spain. That when they were kicked out of Spain, they came to the capital of the Islamic State in Istanbul. And we know many examples like this. We know that at the time of Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he wasn't able to look after the Christians, he gave their jizya back. They said the Romans never did this to us. When the Romans taxed us and took our money, they never gave it back. We know the story when Islam went to Uzbekistan and the non-Muslims complained to the Khalif. They said, in your Islam, it says that you have to invite us to Islam. And if we don't accept it, to live under Islam, and if we don't accept it, then to tell us that you're going to come and take over. He goes, your generals never did that. So the Khalifa investigated this. He got a judge, he goes, investigate this claim. And he found out that it was true. So, once it was established that the Muslim army went into Uzbekistan without following the proper procedure, the Khalifa said to the entire army, withdraw. And the non-Muslims came back and said, no, we complained that they didn't follow the rules, but we're happy with the way they're looking after us. We want them to stay. We want them to stay. And again, people talk about, oh, this was the old days. This was the old days. Let me read you a letter from a Jewish rabbi who lived in Istanbul. This is in the 15th century. This is talking about the Islamic State now. He goes, here in the land of the Turks, we have nothing to complain about. We possess great fortunes. Much gold and silver is in our hands. We are not oppressed by heavy taxes, and our commerce is free and unhindered. Rich are the fruits of the earth. Everything is cheap, and each one of us lives in freedom. Here, a Jew is not compelled to wear a yellow badge as a badge of shame, as is the case in Germany, where even our wealth and great fortune is a curse for a Jew, because he arouses jealousy amongst the Christians, and they devise all kinds of slander against him to rob him of his gold. Arise, my brethren, gird up your loins, collect your forces, and come to us. He's telling the Jews that leave the Christian countries and come and live with the Muslims, because you will live a good life here. You will not be harassed. Let's talk about international politics. What did the Islamic State do in international politics? You know, in 1525, the French king was arrested by the Russians. And the French, they wrote a letter to the Khalifa, oh, come and help us. Because the Khalifa was the Islamic State was the superpower. The French wrote a letter to the Muslims and said, come and help us. And the Khalifa, he wrote a letter back to them. And Sulaiman al-Qanuni, who was the Khalifa, he wrote a letter. He said, we have received your letter, delivered by your messenger, and in which you stated that your enemy has attacked your country, and you, the king, are in prison and seek our help in respect to securing your release. We have answered your request, so be at ease and don't worry. So even the other non-Muslim countries would come to help, to ask the Islamic State for help, because they know they would help, and they had the power to help. Spanish Armada. How many of you in the schools have read about the Spanish Armada? Francis Drake. What they don't tell you is the British wrote a letter to the Khalif in Istanbul to say the Spanish are going to attack us, can you help us? And the Khalif sent a navy which attacked the Spanish Armada and weakened them before they came to England. And had it not been for the help of the Spanish, by the Ottoman army, Britain would have been easily defeated by the Spanish. And the Protestants would have lost control of Britain, and the Catholics would have controlled Britain. So that was the power of the Islamic State, the superpower. When the US Navy in the 1800s started to get strong and powerful and started to send their ships to the Mediterranean, the Khilafah taught them a lesson that don't come snooping in our waters. You're not welcome here. And they did it a second time, and again they defeated them. And then they forced the Americans. They said, you're not coming here again. And they made them sign a treaty, and they said, you have to pay the Islamic State a tax every year. And from that date, from the 1800s until 1924, the Americans had to pay a tax to the Islamic State. And a promise that they won't come snooping in their waters again. And these are just some of the examples that when Islam existed on this earth, what goodness it brought to humanity. What goodness it brought to humanity and the protection it brought to the humanity. The inventions, there's a brother who's got a book there, which I read some years ago, about the inventions of the Muslim Ummah. The progress they made. This was during the time Islam existed on this earth as a system. So 100 years after Hijrah, half of the known world had embraced Islam. Tell me, in the last 100 years, in the last 88 years when there's been no Khilafah, which new country has become an Islamic country? How many countries have come Islamic? 0. And in 100 years from the time of Madinah, the whole world from Madinah to Spain became Muslim. That's the effect the Islamic State had. But you know what? I don't call that the golden era. That was the period of Islamic ruling. I don't call that the golden era. The golden era existed in Mecca, when the Sahaba struggled to establish Islam. Because the struggle of the Sahaba was golden. And they achieved, in the eyes of Allah, they achieved the gold medal. And the benefits of their struggle we benefited from. And the generations after that benefited from. And again, we find ourselves in a world when there is no Islamic State. And this is the second golden period. This is the second golden period. And anybody today who struggles for Islam, they will achieve high rewards like the Sahaba, and they will achieve honor in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us to following the footsteps of the first generation and keeps us firm on that guidance until the decree of Allah comes to pass. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد والحمد لله رب العالمين.
We all know the stories about how the Muslims used to live, about the inventions and things like that, but it's always good to hear the full history of it and certain events that happened which maybe we're not so sure about anymore, because our history has by and large been erased. It's been stripped away from us. There was a certain event in history which I'm sure we're all familiar of, just under 1,000 years ago, when the first real encounter between the Western world and the Islamic world took place. I'm talking about the Crusades, of course. And what happened during the Crusades was when the Western Christians, when they got to the Islamic world, the things they saw that blew their mind. There were riches and spices and fabrics and buildings and education like they'd never experienced. What we call our golden age, they call their dark age. And when they got here, when they got to the Muslim world, they couldn't believe what they saw. They couldn't believe it. And of course, they thought, well, we want a piece of that. And what happened next was the Crusades. Over the next 100 or so years, they kept coming back. And they were resoundingly defeated again and again, until it ended in a standoff, and they left. But they never forgot what they'd seen. When they came back to Europe, and we all know how cold and miserable it is here, they got back. What did they have? And they said, you know what? One day we need to go back. What they've got there, we know that there was a massive empire to the south, and it was a threat to them. But they knew militarily they didn't stand a chance. There was nothing they could do, and they thought, what was it that made these people fight us so valiantly? And of course, this was Islam. This was their belief. And so they knew that the only way they could ever defeat the Muslims was to strip them from that, was to split them up, to tear them apart. the Muslims were united. And so what they did, instead of attacking militarily, they were a lot sneakier about it the second time round. And we're talking about 200, 300 years ago now. When the Western countries, they started to infiltrate Muslim lands, and instead they didn't attack. They went to Egypt and they said, "You're not Muslims, you're Egyptians." They went to the Arab Peninsula and said, "You're not Muslims, you're Arabs." They went to Turkey. "You're not Muslims, you're Turks. Why should you care about the Arabs?" And this took a long time. But ultimately, yeah, people started to think, you know what, it's right, why are we listening? Because the capital of the Islamic State was in Istanbul, it was in Turkey. And they started to say, well, we're Arabs, why should we listen to the Turks? The Prophet ﷺ was an Arab. Doesn't it make more sense that we're in charge? And this idea took hold all across the Muslim world. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he said the Muslim Ummah is one body. And what the non-believers did was they chopped that body up. And if you chop a body up, and there's over 50 Muslim countries now in the world, if you chop a body into 50 pieces, you don't get 50 bodies. You get a bloody mess. And that's all we've got today. When we switch on the news, that's what we see. And since March the 3rd, 1924, that's what we've seen. Now, inshallah, Brother Asim's going to elaborate further on that and about, inshallah, what we can do about that as well.